Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe. If you can hear and see me, give me a thumbs up. All right. All right. Good job. Well, hey, getting used to the new setup here. It's a little, it's familiar, but there's some little nuances that I'm messing around with and trying to figure out and get creative with. So, does everybody like the new intro? All right. If you like the new intro, give me a clapping hands thing or whatever, like emoji. Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, cool. It's not professional by any stretch of the imagination. That's why I'm just proud of it because I did it. Man, there's just like so many things, little nuances going into it. Well, all right. Well, tonight is called Left of Bang, and I came across this as a book actually by Patrick Horn and Jason Riley, and it's I'll just read to you the description. It's based on the Marine Corps' Combat Hunter program. Left of Bang refers to the time right before a violent or catastrophic event, in the moment when you're still able to observe, prepare, and act. So, in in our parlance, like things we talk about quite a bit. So left of bang would be like September 10th, you know, or you're at a place right before something bad happens and you can sense something but you just can't put your finger on it. And so this is what that's kind of leaning on, is that intuition that we have because something that you're seeing is not making sense. So the bang is the attack, or it's like the collapse or attack or crisis. I think living left of bang would be you're living proactively rather than reactively. And it's something that was honed in on during the war on terror when we were in Afghanistan and Iraq. And what it was is trying to pick up on behavioral cues. If you're a Marine and you're out in a village doing a patrol and you've got a crowd of people and something you see doesn't something stands out, right? It doesn't fit with the rest of the picture, or there's something's off. And this is what they're training the Marines how to hone in on that little nuance of it, of looking at the behavioral cues, looking at things that are amiss, things that are off kilter, out of sync, whatever. That is what this is talking about. And they give it a few examples of, like, they're in a village and it's late May, early summertime, it's hot, but you see somebody with like a full jacket on or something, and a crowd of people that are wearing just the bare minimum because of the heat, and then there's somebody standing there with a jacket. There's something that's an obvious example, but it's things like that can stand out in our memories of things that are off, things that are amiss, something that's different with the picture. And that is what we're going to talk about tonight. And I guess in a way it's kind of like situational awareness, being situationally aware of your surroundings. And in the army, we had a saying of, keep your head on a swivel, which means it's like you're constantly looking, left and right. Uh, And it's why a lot of guys, combat guys that were, whether Vietnam or any other conflicts, they can't sit with their back to the door, or they don't like to be in large crowds. There's a whole lot of like these little PTSD trigger things for guys like that can't let go of that edge. They want to keep that edge on. And well, this is teaching us how to develop some of that edge. I don't want to say that everything is a conspiracy, because I don't believe that. Some things are just the way they are, and there's no rhyme or reason to why they happen, save for what God allows to happen. But so it's not being suspicious about every single thing that comes up, but it's also keeping a wary eye on your surroundings, especially as we get into these last days, because uh, we're in perilous times, right? Let me read this to you. Just some kind of opening thoughts. To live wisely in these last days, we must do so being spiritually awake or alert, and like the sons of Issachar, understanding the times in which we live, because we absolutely, irrefutably live in the last days. Hebrews 1 and 2 states that, quote, God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he is appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the worlds. Now, if we were in the last days when Christ was first here on the earth and his first advent, I mean, we are at the tippy point of the spear at the very end of the last days. I mean, we're literally, um, well, for one, I mean, we're as far removed from that event as humanity's ever been, and every second that we press forward into, we're that 1 second, 1 minute further from the cross and the resurrection of Christ. And that ultimately is going to come to an end point. It's not just going to go on indefinitely. The way this world is today is not going to go on indefinitely. And there's nothing in history, we could look back through the rise and fall of hundreds of different empires and kingdoms and nations and powers and regions and city states and whatever. And there's there's literally just a nonstop rise and fall of all of these different places that have come and gone. And they all thought the way that the world was in their life, they thought it was going to stay the same. And then it didn't, and whether they're destroyed through slow corruption, or they're conquered, suddenly by an enemy, or, it's a famine or some type of pestilence, wipes them out, or whatever the case is. Nobody really expects the world to change that radically in their lifetimes. We all kind of think the way things are the way they always be. And I mean, I know for me, and I don't consider myself that old, but the world has radically changed from the 70s until today. I mean, and I'm 50, right? So imagine how much different would the world have been if I were born in 1774 to 1825? Like, how different would the world be? Aside from the United States becoming a nation, and some wars, Napoleon rising up. I mean, like, technologically or societally, how much different would the world be from 1774 to 1825? It's not that much different. I mean, they're still riding around in horse and buggies. They still, firing musket, weapons and rifles, and um, most of the world's economies are agrarian. There's uh, there wasn't a whole lot of change. But if you look at the way the world changed from, say, 1874 to 1925, well, that's a lot of change right there. But I would argue there's even more change from 1974 to 2025. And that's just, my lifetime. Um, if I were just to look at it, I could say that the change was exponential. Each set of 50 years was an exponential growth as compared to the next one, the one prior. Now, knowing that we live in the last days and understanding that from a biblical perspective is paradoxed with regard to the facade that the world that we live in puts over our eyes every day. And so what I mean by that is we live in a reality right now that basically refuses to believe that there is a spiritual world beyond the physical world. We live in a world that acts as if there is no spiritual domain or eternal realm or God or angels or anything like that. They just pretend like this little blue ball that we're floating around in on space is it. That's all there is to reality. And that's all of the world systems. That's the entertainment, that's academia, that's government, that's everything. Political, financial, I would even say, religious to a large degree. They like the idea of religion. They want to dismiss the power behind it, though. For most of the world's top religious leadership, for them it's a career choice. It's a business. It's something that they've devoted their lives to, and right or wrong, they're gonna they're gonna see it through for whatever end that's going to end up for them. But a lot of the religious folks, you know, they don't even believe anymore. They're just in it because that's how they make their living, or that's the family business, or that's the uh, maybe they think they've learned so many secrets, like the folks that hang around the Vatican, that they have all the inside scoop, and that that Jesus was married, and they believe all that stuff. I don't know. When you get to a certain level in a religious organization, things start to become political. It's same thing in the military, right? In the military, if you were about a lieutenant colonel and below, your promotions were all merit based, and it was all based on your education. Did you meet the educational requirements? Did you check all the blocks to get to where you are? But above lieutenant colonel, or an O5, once you start getting into full bird colonel, and then brigadier general, and major general, lieutenant general, and then your general, that's all political. And it's like, who what's your reputation, what kind of leader are you, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that is just to say that all of this system is the theological system, and all these religious hierarchies. Once you get above a certain position in an organization, it becomes more and more political and human centric than it does what they really believe in terms of the spiritual world, the spiritual realm. The world is trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes to make it seem like this is reality. And I know it's real in the sense that I could touch this table, or I can, you're seeing me through a video stream that's a bunch of digits, ones and zeros, etc., and we're communicating in a global sense. And this is real, and it is a form of reality, but it's not like the final form of reality. This is not the source code, if you will. If you think about it in computer terms, we're in a copy. Chuck Missler was on to something years ago when he talked about this being potentially a copy of reality, and we are a copy of reality. And it talks about this in Hebrews as well. But we live in a fallen world, a world that was taken over by Satan, and he's temporarily in control of this world. And he's got the Herculean task of trying to convince people that what they're seeing is not really real, and what they're not seeing is not real. So when you look at the world today, and let's say you didn't know anything about God, or you didn't know anything about any particular religion, but you understood, you had general intelligence, you understood a little bit about the way the world works in terms of the sky and water, sunshine, things like that. And you're walking along the beach, you would just have a general observation that everything is where it's supposed to be. Things are where they're supposed to be. They would look at a shell, and the shell doesn't stand out from the thousands of other shells they may have walked past, or the sand, or maybe like a sea creature washed up on shore. Whatever it is that they're looking at, they're going to be looking at part of nature. But then they walk up a little further and they come across, like a Rolex watch, or they come across a pistol, or they come across whatever, something that's obviously man-made. And that's going to look remarkably different than what they're used to seeing on this beach. And what it should tell them is that this isn't natural, because nature doesn't do things like a Rolex watch. Nature makes amazing things, but it doesn't make these complex machinery things, like made out of metal, and springs, and batteries, and component parts that are layered on top of each other in precise designed way. We have natural functions in our body that does things like that, in our cells, and our organs and whatnot. But I'm talking about just, finding something on the beach. You would, if you had no knowledge of God, you would still think that something else made that thing that you found. You would just, with general intelligence, you would realize that this is different than everything else you've seen. It stands apart, right? It's not the same material. It's not the same design. Maybe it's parts in it are still moving around or whatever. So there's motion inside of it. So it would stand out and stand apart from everything else you'd come across thus far. And the point is that even that person would denote, just with general intelligence, that somebody made this thing, or something made this, that this just didn't appear from nowhere. It didn't come about naturally like everything else on the beach had. So all that to say is that we have nature as a gigantic witness for the argument of a creator, and it's everywhere, and it's in everything. It's in our DNA. It's in the cellular structure of every item. If we take things down to the atomic level, we can see design and structure in everything that we can look at, anything that's observable. And so design, and especially the smaller you get, the more complex things become in terms of design, that should denote a creator, right? And think about it this way too. If for example, we had, let's say back in I don't know what year it was when they invented like the microscope, right? And whatever that first year was, and we began to look at things at a smaller and smaller scale. Let's say whatever the first functional, really good microscope, whatever year that was. Let's say that they finally cut into the human body and took a slice of skin to look at what's underneath the skin. And what if they looked in there and it wasn't anything? What if it was just like some pink material that you know there was no cells, there was no it we couldn't answer how humans got here, right? If we couldn't understand what was under our skin, if we couldn't understand things at the cellular level, we would have a hard time of understanding the human genome and just in general. But when you do open the human body up, or when you do take skin cells and you put them under a microscope, you see intelligent design all over every. It's about it, turn a phrase, but like every square inch, you could see design in there, and everything that you look at, from the way that the order of the sun, moon, and stars, from the rising of the sun every day and the setting of the sun at night. And I know that the sun doesn't literally rise or literally set. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like every 24 hours or every 12 hours, we get the day and the night cycle, 24-hour cycle, the consistency in nature in terms of how things flow in patterns, the laws of nature that are observable and repeatable that we see all the time, things like gravity, um, um, I'm trying to think of the word of when things begin to fall apart. Deterioration. Anyways, things left alone fall apart on their own. I mean, nature quickly begins to take back over those things. And things neutralize back to, go back to neutral. The laws of physics, the laws of motions, all of the natural laws that we see. Entropy. Thank you, Juanita. Um, Everything that you look at is screams creator. It screams something other, something bigger than God, or something bigger than the world, something bigger than the solar system, something bigger than all of this. Who we would attribute that to being God is outside of this system, and He made it, and His fingerprints are all over creation everywhere. And I mean, and everything, you know. And for the world, for us to live in a time where we have the most evidence available to us to prove that God exists, before microscopes were invented, you could open up a body or whatever and look at the different organs and stuff, but there was only so far you could look into you couldn't look at this, the down to the microscopic level, because you didn't have anything to look at it, that you didn't know about germs and things like that. Um, but the more we discovered about the human body, the more we realized that we could not have come from primates, and we could not have evolved. And when you see the complexity of each individual organ in a body and how it functions separately, but sometimes it does things for other parts of the body, that there would be no logical connection. We wouldn't think about how this thing connects to that thing, you know, but it does. And you can see this throughout nature. I mean, throughout nature, there is so many different types of symbiotic relationships between organisms that can't survive without the other, but yet are completely different entities, yet they have this like perfect relationship together. So did they evolve at the same exact, I mean, like there's so many problems with the theory of evolution. I mean, it is completely, even science is largely abandoned it these days because it's so undefendable. The point is that we live in this world where Satan, the temporary manager of this world, is deceiving everybody into believing that there is no creator. I mean, I know it sounds pretty on the nose for us right here and now for this particular audience, but imagine a world where everybody actually believed in a real God, that really that actually believed that there was a God and one day they were going to have to answer to him. I mean, just think about how much better the world would be instantaneously with just that one with that one idea. But yeah, I mean, Satan has a Herculean task trying to convince the world, and he's done a bang up job thus far because most of the world right now could care less about Jesus or salvation or any of these other things. And it just boggles my mind, but it's more than individually that there are people that just refuse to believe. It's just that the whole system has been rigged in such a way that when you go out to the public arena of ideas, or you're talking on at a congressional hearing, or you're talking at this, that, and the other, there might be some people that give personal, say, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ." There might be some of that personal stuff, but there's no serious discussions at the congressional level about serious biblical matters. A Because they would largely view that as not the time or place to discuss such things, because they keep promoting this lie that there's this huge separation of church and state. The only separation is that the state can't tell the church what to preach. All the limitation is on the state side, not the church's side, or that's the way it was designed. Okay, so we got to reframe reality. We have to recognize that this world that we live in is temporary. It's passing away. I'm not saying that we need to live like a bunch of Millerites and sell everything we own and go live on a hill and wait for the Lord to come back. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that occupy till he comes, right? Live your life, um, plant your gardens, what you're going to invest in, take care of your family, make plans for that summer vacation, continue to be there and play an integral role in your family and your marriage and whatever case that you're in. I don't want folks checking out. Even if it happens this spring, even if it happens this Tish B'Av, even if it happens this fall, let's just say hypothetically that we all knew. Let's just say we knew supernaturally that the rapture was going to be this October. What would you be doing differently now with that knowledge rather than if you didn't have that knowledge? And I would argue there shouldn't hardly be any change to your life. You should just you keep because you keep doing the same thing because that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? And I'm trying to occupy until he comes, and whatever open door comes open for me, I go through it and I try and serve the best I can, and whether that's teaching in a small group inside of a county jail, or if that's speaking at a conference, or if it's speaking to a small church here, or an individual here, or whatever. I just try to make myself accessible, but at the same time, you know we have responsibilities to our families. We have responsibilities to our spouses, if you have a spouse. We have responsibilities to our children. You know, we need to train up our children in the ways that of Scripture, so that when they grow older, they won't depart from it. You know, it should in that passage in Deuteronomy where it talks about. Let me pull that up. Maybe it's might be in Joshua. Deuteronomy 6:8. Deuteronomy 6:8. All right, I'm going to start in verse Deuteronomy 6:6. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as a frontlet between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and of your gates. I hope that at least in this audience that you have these conversations with your kids, or I mean, my kids are a little younger than maybe a lot of other people, but I've never shied away from talking about the rapture, talking about the second coming, all the things that are coming, but all the good things that are coming, all the things that they have to look forward to. And at the same time, I teach them, hey, but we don't know. It could be this year, it could be next year. We don't really know when exactly this is going to happen. So we keep making plans, and we keep going on vacation, and we keep, just living life and occupying till he comes. And I want people to realize too that, you've got to hold loosely to the things of this world. And it's a little bit of a dichotomy in a way. You occupy till he comes. So we don't know when that's going to be, but we also don't know when we're going to take our last breath. I mean, for any of us, it could be at any moment. So none of us really know when that moment's going to be. But you don't stop living your life just for the fact that you don't know when you're going to die, right? I mean, you keep living, you keep making plans, you keep going to work, you keep grocery shopping, and you don't just say, I'm going to die anyways, I'll just quit buying food. No, you still live your life, right? So we have to occupy till he comes. We have to look beyond what we're seeing, and not asking the question, what is happening, but ask the question, why is it happening? And then recognize the grand scheme of things, which is that this world is temporary, it's passing away, that the eternal realm is literally right beyond our ability to see, but it's there, it's all around us. It's not in some distant, far off quadrant of the universe. It's probably on the other side of this veil that we have in front of us that separates us from the spiritual domain, but it's probably all around us. Recognize that this world and the systems of this world are always pitted against the Bible, they're pitted against Christianity. And in the off chance that things do go good or do go in a positive way, recognize that the enemy is going to immediately begin to attack and corrupt that thing to either minimize its effect or change its trajectory altogether. And a perfect example of that is, like, look at all the the good intentions out there with things, whether political bills or uh, political candidates, or certain types of inventions, technologies. They get made for some good purpose, and then very quickly those things become hijacked and it gets used for something bad. Or that politician starts off good and then they get corrupted by the money and the power and the influence, and then they get corrupted, right? They're no good anymore. everything, like anything that has a good positive thing, it's good for just like a minute, and then it's immediately attacked and corrupted. And that goes across for religious organizations, for charities, for you name it. I mean, the enemy is going to attack it. He is throwing everything he has at stopping the Bible, stopping the message from going out. We have to recognize that yes, this world is coming to an end and this world is passing away, but this world doesn't want to pass away. It's not going to go down without a fight, right? I mean, so you got to recognize that when you begin talking about the coming of the Lord, you start talking about the rapture, you start talking, and the world, the system is going to come against you because it does not want things to change. I mean, you talk about what Donald Trump going into Washington D.C. and wanting to drain the swamp. Well, that's just one city for one nation, and we're talking about the global swamp that Satan is controlling right now, and he's got more fallen angels at his command than there are humans. So just realize that the system, the entirety of the system, is rigged against us. And it's not just that the world doesn't want to pass away, but our flesh doesn't want to pass away. Our flesh want what's the flesh want what's the flesh wants what the flesh wants, right? Right, like right now the flesh wants a bacon and egg taco really bad. But I shouldn't eat that right before I go to bed. It's not good for the old love handles. The flesh wants carnality now, like it wants what it wants now, and the flesh is. Then that's why every one of us are struggling or struggle with sin, and we struggle against the flesh. And every Christian that's ever lived is going to struggle against the flesh, because now you've awakened something inside of you, this God-shaped hole that's now energized by this foreign entity from the flesh's perspective, and you're constantly at war because both natures want to dominate. The flesh wants to dominate and the spirit wants to dominate. So which flesh or which one are you feeding more, and which one are you empowering more to dominate in your life? Well, we see that through the spectrum of Christians that we run into on a daily basis, and I'm not judging, I'm not passing judgment on anybody. I'm just saying that we run into the whole gambit of that. And, it's something that everybody has to deal with on an individual basis. It's not some, 12-step program that I can sell you or give you and say, hey, this is the one-stop shop. This is what fixes it for you in your particular instance, because it doesn't work for everybody the same way. What worked for me and what happened to me back in 2007 and 8, I, I, I can't explain how that works other than it was the Holy Spirit and for his own purposes and reasons. Why doesn't that happen to everybody else? I don't know. And there's people that have had far more impactful and just life altering changes than I've had, and I'm not saying that mine was better than theirs or theirs was better than mine, or whatever happens. I think God individually tailors this for each one of us. And there's something in our lives that if you're a born again believer, there was something unique to you in that moment that has never happened to any other person in all of creation. And that was specifically designed for you. And it was specifically designed for me, how it happened. So I think, I've talked about this before, when you look at the genealogies, we look in scripture, we see so-and-so begat so-and-so and so on, on and on and on. Well, I think in our own Christian genealogies, as it were, our spiritual family trees, we can trace all of our lineages back to one of the apostles, who then trace it to Christ. And I just think that just like we have that level of fidelity with understanding where we come from and where our lineage is. It's meant to, like, for me, it's like something that would embolden us to carry on the family tree, so to speak, right? So, like, in a lot of pagan cultures, and I'm not by any stretch trying to say we need to mimic what they do. I'm just using this as an example. But in a lot of family trees, there's a family line that, you belong to this clan, or you belong to this particular group or this group, and there's a sense of pride in it, a family pride, a familial pride. And there's nothing wrong with being proud of things. Obviously pride is a serious issue, but we're talking about pride in a thing, like maybe a football team, or if you're, whatever your background is, maybe you're Irish or Scottish or Spanish or whatever. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those kinds of things, but I think, like, we need it. It has to be obviously in healthy doses, like anything else, moderation. Um, but I think our own family trees need to tie in to the battle against the flesh. That we're carrying on a family, a lineage of faith that goes back millennia. You know, I don't know, and I'm not even really 100% matured my position on this, but because we see it a lot in Scripture, we just don't see it applied to the church. But it doesn't make any sense to me, because I would think that we should each have our own lineage, and I'm sure we do, and we're not going to know it this side of the rapture. But you know, if we could just be a little forward thinking in this and think, well, I want to bring honor to my particular family, my family tree line, whatever. I don't know, just something, whatever it is that helps you cement in or anchor into some touch point in your daily walk. And it's just fun to think about things like this too, because I think when we get so pigeonholed into a particular view on whatever subject, and we just get entrenched in this view, and next thing you know, we don't want to ever get out of this view, even if it's wrong. It makes it harder and harder. And I'm not saying that you can't be dogmatic on certain things, because obviously we can. There's certain biblical truths that are, we don't budge on those things. But there's a lot of things that haven't happened yet, and that in Scripture we know prophetically. I've listened probably in the last 6 months more on Mystery Babylon than I've listened to it in my entire life, in terms of as a particular subject. And I've heard so many different positions on who is Mystery Babylon from very well respected teachers. And I mean, polar opposite sides of the view on who is Mystery Babylon. So I I'm not going to get super worked up or upset one way or the other, because we can't prove this either way. I know some people were upset with me because I was going to do this thing with Tyler and on is the U.S. Mystery Babylon. And I'm just like, look, regardless of what my position is, we're going to be out of here before it happens. So I have no way to prove it one way or the other. None of us do. None of us. Unless you plan on being here during the tribulation, which I hope none of anybody watching this right now has no intentions of being here for that. But, what I mean? Like, you can't prove it one way or the other. So it's all a little bit of speculation. We're all looking at the evidence and trying to make sense of it. And so, anyways. All right. Let me keep going. The spiritual war is the hidden reality. The Bible, I think, has been pretty clear that just because we don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And everything that we do see or if we do see it physically, we should realize that it's temporary, that it's not, this is not the final form of reality. Just like we see the church in Matthew 13, Jesus is given these mystery kingdom parables. The church is the mystery kingdom in its present form, but not in its final form. It's, we're growing, like a body, and we're adding new believers every day. There's new cells being added to this body, if you think about it that way, and we make up this mosaic. We're like these little individual composite pieces, but when you put us in together, we form this greater picture. And the greater picture is we make up the body of Christ. So for the last 2,000 years, we've been adding into this, but we don't see it. And one of the strengths of like Roman Catholicism is this, its ability to tie itself to history and to tradition. And it can point to this church over here in Greece and say that was built in 332, and this was built in here, and these are all Catholic bishops, and they have a strength to that, and there's a draw and there's an appeal to that by people that want permanence and some type of permanence in their faith system. We, you know, we could all, I mean, right now we're meeting online, but let's just say that we had a small room. We don't need anything in that room. We don't need any icons, any paintings. We don't need any religious artifacts. The only thing we need is a Bible. And we could worship in there and have an amazing worship service. And yet we could all come from different backgrounds, from different places, and never meet again. And that's been the true remnant church, has largely lived in the shadows for the last 2,000 years. And there's always been a remnant church on the earth, and there will always be one until the rapture. And then the second that the rapture happens, there'll be a period of time. I don't know how long, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, when there won't be a single believer on the earth. And that's odd to think about it that way, There won't be a single person who's a born again believer on the earth right after the rapture. I imagine that within anywhere from 30 seconds to several minutes after the rapture, that there will be people that were with loved ones or with others when it happened, and as soon as it happened, they knew and they immediately believed. So that's why I think it would be very, very, like right after it happened, is somebody saw it happen right in front of you. I mean, it'd be very hard to disprove that. Okay, I'm going to read here a couple more passages. So just recognize that the spiritual war is always there. It's always present, and it's always hidden in reality, or hidden from reality. It says in Ephesians 6:12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age." The way that this world is designed, it's designed to keep you blind, distracted, confused, um, you know, asleep, unaware, drugged, whatever. That's everything in this world is designed that way. And whether it's in an entertainment, or whether it's in what you do for pleasure, it's in our sports, it's in our system. When I was in the Army in San Antonio back in, this was 2009, 2010 timeframe, and I was working at the place where we did a lot of the future studies. But even after that, I've heard it in a lot of meetings. One of the things that used to irk me to no end was when we were planning 5, 10 years out for anything. I mean, I was like, that's pretty audacious of us to think that we can plan that far out, and our plans actually make it further than even a couple of days outside of this door. much less planning 10 years out or whatever. I hated that. Oh, you talk about bringing me down into a bad mood. Um, but yeah, everything is. I mean, nothing is planned in this world right now that takes God into consideration. There's nothing that's. You read any of the National Security Council's threat assessments and any of these other any agency from any government, nobody considers the rapture as a possibility. I mean, they plan on aliens before they plan on the rapture happening. So nobody takes this thing seriously at all. And most of the church don't take it seriously either. We are a very, very tiny minority within the church. Number 6, how to live left of bang. Well, first of all, you got to wake up, right? So the minute that you wake up from your sleep, you're already in a different state of mind, right? You're not dreaming about whatever, being on a beach, kicking back in a hammock or something. You're the minute you go from unconsciousness to consciousness, there's automatically a change. And I would liken this to Christians, and I'm just talking about Christians here, who for the first time in their lives, maybe they're adults, middle-aged or seasoned adults, and they're just now waking up and realizing, oh my goodness, I had no idea there was so much that the Bible had to say on this particular subject about what's coming. And once that light bulb's on, that's it, man. You're going to be changed forever. There's no going back, right? So that's the first thing, is just waking up. And then once you wake up and you start thinking about stuff and you start thinking about everything, you want to get up and get that thinking, that mental activities, you want that to translate into physical activities. You want that to produce something, some result. And for each of you out there, maybe that, I'm pretty sure that result's going to be different for every one of you. And for some of you, it may be writing things down. Maybe it's praying for somebody, or participating or leading a Bible study, or caring for somebody that needs to be cared for, that can't care for themselves. Maybe it's just being a good coworker, being a good employee, being a good boss. Maybe that, you apply this to your own situation, whatever that is. And that's being the best version of you that you can be, recognizing that this world and everything in it is passing away, and that our end in this story is coming to an end very quickly. And we want to go out on a high note. We want to go out being found faithful in what God's called us to do. And I don't know what that is for you. Whatever that is for you, I just pray that you pray on it and say, God, I feel like you're leading me in this area. If this is where you want me to go, open that door for me, or close that door, if it's not what you want me to do. And you'll start to recognize the open doors and the closed doors. If you haven't already, maybe you already have. Intellectually, so, spiritually waking up, emotionally waking up. Emotionally, this is, let me do an intellectual first. So the intellectual part of this is not, it's not gaining knowledge for the sake of like winning arguments, or for your own, pride, to beef yourself up. It's part of the defense mechanism for knowing and understanding your enemy. And so when you understand scripture, and the enemy's, 90% of the enemy's warfare against you is going to be misinformation, and you're going off of the source document, right? You have the source document, so this tells you the reality of things and the correct view and position on said things. And then the world is saying all this other stuff. Well, now you begin to develop discernment. You begin to develop this ability to say, okay, well, the world is saying this is right, but the Bible says this is right. So whose view am I going to take? Regardless of how logical it may appear on the surface, whose position are you going to follow? You can follow what the Bible says, or you can follow what the world says. And what the world says is constantly changing. They're always moving the chains. There's just no set place. They're constantly on the go. So it's just it's a constantly moving goalpost. You can't win with the world because it's always going to change. The people that thought they were radical Democrats in the 90s turned out to be very conservative Democrats here in the 2020s, as compared to where things have gone since then. The radicals today will be tame compared to what will be in 2040, should the Lord tarry and we're still here in 2040. And I can hear all the groaning right now. You know what I mean, right? I'm just saying, what's tolerated in one generation becomes becomes mandatory in the next. It's just that kind of train of logic. All right. Okay. So Romans 13:11, and do this, knowing the time that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. Now is the time to wake out of our sleep, to wake out of the slumber, to not, drink at night or be drunk at night, to not let our lights go out or burn out. I mean, think of all the different examples we see. And the general sentiment is to be watching, to be aware, to understand the times in which we live so that we're not caught unawares. Paul wrote that in 1 Thessalonians 5. But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. He's telling them, because he had already taught them this stuff. He goes, I've already taught you this stuff. Like you don't need me to tell you what it is. You're going to know it. You're going to recognize the signs and the seasons. But how many of the church have not been taught this? I would say a vast majority have not been taught that the Lord's return is imminent and soon. Continuing, it says, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. This day should not overtake you as a thief. This day should not catch you unawares. This day should not catch you sleeping. It should not catch you by surprise. We should see this day coming. The writer in Hebrews says that we would see this day coming. Do not forsake the assembling together of yourselves, as in the manner of some, but gathering together as you see that day approaching, even more as you see that day approaching. Jesus in Revelation 3:3 telling the church at Sardis, if you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief, and you will not know the hour I come upon you. So it's to me, it's like there is an expectation for us to be watching and waiting, and not only watching and waiting and sitting idly by, but occupying until he comes, serving in whatever manner that is, being busy about the Lord's work. And the Lord has opened up doors for all of us, and it's just a matter of going out and doing those things. Well, that's kind of what I had tonight, was just this idea that if we are watching and if we are waiting, we are living with this left of bang mindset, that we're living with this where we're watching for things that are standing out, and we're pointing them out, and we're using those as evidences to share with friends and family, to say, look, this is what the Bible talked about. thousands of years ago, and now it's happening. And then, maybe it opens a door, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just plants a seed. You don't know. But just like Jesus repeatedly said, I'm telling you these things beforehand so that when they happen, you'll believe. And I feel like right now God has given this open door with social media, and this message can go out all over the world. And I know we may have a small channel, and that's okay. I'm not, I'm not in it for my own glory. I don't. I'm just doing this because I feel like the Lord's given me this opportunity to do it. And so I think each of you should go out and use these opportunities, and whatever that looks like for you. And maybe there's just a friend of yours that's on your heart, that's been on your heart for a while, and you just start praying for them and keep praying for them. And then, next thing you know, God opens up an opportunity for you to share with them. And, just like my friend Josh, I had on the other night, I hadn't seen him in 5 years, and we go out for lunch one day, and, I am just completely on fire. This is all I'm talking about, all the time. And what was powerful for him, not so much what I was saying, but the fact that he knew who I used to be. And he knew there's something very different about Pete now. And it's something that I'm interested in because I see how it changed his life. And so anyways, guys, multiply that times however many people are watching this. I mean, each of us have these stories to tell, with friends and family in our own life. And I would say too, that some of the hardest people to witness to and to share with are spouses or significant others. And if you have a Christian spouse, man, thank God. Just for that, just for being blessed in those regards. But some of you don't have that. And so we are called to pray for our spouses. And I would encourage folks to read 1 Corinthians 7. And Paul touches on this subject and just recognizing where we are in time, recognizing that we're at the end, and doing the best with what God's given us to work with. And again, God doesn't call the prepared, he prepares the called. And I'm not saying that some people aren't prepared when they go. Sometimes they are. If God called me to go do something different, I would at least have a base, understanding of what I've been doing for the last. I would use this as experience, going forward into whatever the next thing is. But don't feel like you can't do something because you don't feel prepared. If God's called you to do it, he'll prepare you to do it, and he'll give you the ammunition and the tools to do it. So that's what I wanted to leave y'all with tonight. Not a super long one, just kind of a little bit of encouragement, and get you guys thinking about, wake you up out of this slumber. I know y'all aren't necessarily slumbering, but we're at war. This is a war. And even though you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not going on all around you all day long, 24/7, 365 days a year. It is going on. And the greatest battlefield in this planet, in this universe, is not on Armageddon. It's not, in the Pacific. It's not against China. It's not in space. It's not in cyberspace. The greatest battlefield is your mind. And the enemy is constantly trying to conquer your mind with things. And so this is it. The enemy is 100% committed to destroying this for you, or getting you off on track on some other thing that takes you away from God. So the mind is the battlefield that we're concerned about. So being cognizant, being awake, recognizing there is a spiritual battle going on around you, recognizing that this world is passing away, and that reality, the real reality, is the spiritual domain, the eternal domain, and that's what we should be living for. And by doing the things that God's called us to do now, we can do both. We can both serve Him and the purpose of whatever He's called us to do, but also being found faithful in the things that are integral to doing that thing, and that's being a good husband, a good wife, a good son, a good daughter, um, a good coworker, a good employee, a good boss, whatever it is, a good grandmother, a good neighbor, wherever God's called you and wherever whatever station you are at in life, you need to focus on being the very best you can, and doing that is, again, being awake spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, being sensitive to the calling of the Holy Spirit. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but if this does apply to you, it's hard, it's hard to just turn everything off and just get quiet, either, read scripture, pray, but spend time with God. And it's frustrating. I understand it's frustrating. We want God to give us answers. Like I wanted him just to say it, yeah, it's this. Or show me, or whatever. I would probably freak out if that actually happened. But, like, you know what I mean? We want an answer to whatever the situation is, an answer to a question, an answer to a problem. And very rarely does God just kind of say, hey, here it is. A lot of times He's going to let these things play out in your life so that while it's happening, you don't necessarily see it. But when you look back in hindsight, you say, oh, wow, that was God. And that's only God can do that. Give me one second. All right, texting my kids good night. All right, let me go to a little bit of Q&A, and then we will be done. Do you think, I don't know if I can do a poll on this thing or not. I was toying around with the idea of doing a nightly show from like 11 to 12 every night. So that'd be Eastern time, something like along the lines of like approaching midnight or something. But it would be more along the lines of just kind of like um, different topics every night. It wouldn't be the same thing every night. I don't know. I'm thinking about that, and it might make sense to, while I'm here in Kentucky. I don't know if I could. Obviously, I don't think I could do it going back home. Okay, so questions today from Brenda. Some YouTube sites talk about spraying the SKY. Is it true or a conspiracy? You know what? That subject is all over the place. I will just say that there's legitimate reasons why they do it, and not legitimate in the sense that I think they should do it, just legitimate reasons why they say they're doing it. Science, weather, monitoring, whatever, cloud seeding for agriculture. And then there's a lot of stuff that happens that doesn't seem so good, especially if you live under the houses when the stuff's falling down and you're able to test the water and, do soil samples and stuff and realize that they're dropping aluminum or whatever it is on your house. So that's all over the board on that. You just have to watch those channels to kind of get a better understanding of what that is. So some of it has a legal use. Some of it appears not to have a legal use. I'll just leave it at that. Patrick Hart, question: the flood would have reworked the Earth dramatically, but I think there are pre-flood ruins today. Giza is made of limestone, which fossils have presumably, which fossil, which have fossils presumably from the flood. So maybe not. Thoughts? So, so yeah. So I think that, in fact, might have a graphic I can use, relatively easy to get to. I don't know if you can hear it. The wind is howling. Man, you can hear the wind howling outside. All right, let me see. I need a haircut. Man, I'm looking like a hippie. I feel like a hippie. My hair is super long right now. It's driving me nuts. All right, this is taking forever to load up. Come on. Let's see. That'll have to do. That'll have to do. All right, share screen. How do I do that on this? Share screen, share window. Here we go. All right, I think you guys should be able to see that. So Genesis 1, 9 through 10, then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and gathering together the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So just looking at the way the world is, we can note that, the picture on the right, it looks like South America fits into Africa. I mean, a lot of the places you can just kind of look at them and say, okay, well, they look, if we look at the Earth as like a jigsaw puzzle, these are the pieces that look like they're supposed to go together. But at the same time, we also know that they're part of the crust. So they're not free floating continents or whatever. They're attached to all the rest of the earth underneath them. And so the idea on the left is called Pangea, and the idea obviously on the right is with the way the world is today. Pangea is that these continents drifted over time. I don't think that they drifted necessarily. I think what took place is that if you had all of the earth as like what you think of as like the crust, and you had one section of it that had water, but the rest of it was land. So the earth was mostly land, but it did have one section that was water. And what happened in the flood was that those got reversed. That what was below, which was the water, which was under the crust, that all came up, and then the water that was above the firmament, I guess we'd think of it as ice. Water at that level would be ice. That came down. And then, on top of that, there may have been some type of rapid weather system changes, because before are you guys seeing this? Can you even see this picture? I'm not seeing. Oh yeah. So it's not even showing. But it says it's sharing a window. Hmm. Entire screen. Let me try that. Oh, you know what? um, yeah. You've got to be smarter than the equipment that you're working with, apparently. Well, I had, and because this is a new layout, I have my phone sitting here so I could look at the questions, and it was covering up the thing that lets you add it to the screen. I'm such a goofball. All right, let me go back to the questions. So his question was, um, the flood would have reworked the earth dramatically, but I think there are pre-flood ruins today. Giza's made of limestones, which have fossils, presumably from the flood. Okay, I see what you're saying. So yeah, so it did fundamentally change the face of the earth, but um, again, what was low was brought high, and what was high was brought low. So if most of the earth were had a thin crust layer of crust around it, and there was like a section with water in it that would be like the giant ocean or seas or whatever it was then. um, During the flood, what was what was high, what was surface at that time would have dropped, what was below that would have came up, and that water would have basically traded places with the ground. And so now that ground is now the bottom of the ocean beds, whether the Pacific or the Atlantic, and what is now the continents in certain regards. And obviously this, I'm not going to say this is exact everywhere around, but that would have been brought high, or it would have stayed high while everything else dropped low. But I think that's the crust was brought up and down rather than continents floating around, if that makes sense. Now, with that said, could pre-flood structures survive the flood event? I mean, if it was catastrophic enough to, um, dislodge continents, or cause the ground to collapse or the other grounds to rise up or sink or whatever. Yeah, I think most, if not all of the pre-flood world would have already been, nothing would have survived that. But for whatever reason, the pyramid at Giza, at least the Great Pyramid at Giza, survived. So I don't know. I don't know. I think that that's possible, that in my theory about the pre-flood world, that the pyramid could have survived regardless. If Egypt in Israel and all that was to be preserved as it was, it seemed like the least amount of geological disruption happened there rather than, say, other parts of the world, South America, North America, etc. So, anyways, that's just a thought. Okay, let's see here. Talia, question: could Amos 3:7 mean we could start that we could get a short? Uh-oh, that was weird. Um, could Amos 3:7 mean we could get a short warning before rapture? Surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plans to his servants, the prophets. I feel like that we will know, and I'm not saying that we're going to know the exact day or the hour, but I feel like we're all going to have this like strong collective feeling of that man, this is close. And maybe it's something that it's not necessarily a feeling, maybe it's something that happens that we pick up on that the rest of the world doesn't pick up on. You know, maybe it's some major movement with, Gog and Magog. I don't know. Maybe it's something with the Temple Mount, or it could be something with the red heifers. It could be something with. I think there'll be something pretty definitive. That I would say definitive. That's a strong word. It's something that when it happens, we're like, ooh, we like all of us collectively, like, ooh, that's important. So I don't know. I feel like that's true. I don't know that we're gonna know specifically, you know, any of that. So I don't know. That I feel like we'll know something, and we'll know it's like the season. I don't know if we can get any more specific than that, but I feel like it's I don't know. Yeah, but it may be, if every watching believer, let's say, I don't know how many people are watching right now, let's say there's 579. Let's say 579 people all had the same dream. That to me would be pretty amazing, you know. Okay, Edward tells, are you aware of the significance of April 8th and Tishri 10? I'm not necessarily. I did watch Heather's channel a couple of days ago. I think she was trying to explain her thoughts on April 8th. She lost me, but yeah, I'm not really sold on anything related to the Jewish calendar in regards to the rapture. And I mean, this is my opinion, completely not worth anything outside of this room. I feel like if there's any connection between the rapture and national Israel, the most logical connection for me, and again, you can't base prophecy on logic necessarily, um, at least human logic, would be Tish B'Av, just because of that it would be a wake up call for the nation of Israel, the unbelieving nation of Israel. So, okay, KG, saved by faith and grace. When the churches go underground and hide, isn't that like denying Christ? That he says, if you deny me, I will deny you, asking for a friend. LOL. No, not necessarily. I guess I don't see it like that. I mean, if they got out, if they got arrested, like for example, so I went to an underground church in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and literally it was underground. It was in a guy's basement. But us going there is being cautious and not advertising what we're doing. We're not making a big deal about it. Going in at different times, etc. There's nothing wrong with being cautious and or exercising caution. But had we gotten dragged out of there by the police, and had they caught us, and we're going to make a public execution of us and things like that, then for me that's where I'd be like, yeah, I'm not denying this. Like, I'm going to take whatever they're going to give me. Now, that doesn't mean that you've lost your salvation. I mean, Peter denied Christ 3 times, the night of his crucifixion, which is kind of the worst thing that he could do, ever do. Um, and so there's forgiveness in any of those moments. Like, is there any moment in your life when you had like a David and Goliath moment and you failed? You didn't rise to the challenge? You know, do you feel like if you now if you know what you know now, you would go back and you would change that in a heartbeat. He wouldn't allow that to stay the way it is. But we don't get that opportunity. We have to live with the past, but you know what? God already saw all of those decisions you made past, so nothing is a surprise to him in terms of your life. Okay. Charlotte Marshall question: Did you see the two beautiful white wolves that were brought back from extinction? A wee bit scary, but they were beautiful. I did not. That is fascinating. I'll have to look that up. Um, no, thanks for sharing that. That's cool. I love nature stuff, so I'll definitely go check that out. Katniss Cat question: Natural people getting to live in the millennium, will they die or live for the full 1,000 years? I understand the great white throne judgment at the end of millennium only for unbelievers. I think Isaiah 65 deals with this passage, but it only mentions those dying at the age of 100 being thought of as children, and that they would only die in their unbelief. So if they were believing, they wouldn't die. So my understanding is that they don't die in the millennium. Now there will have to be some type of transition for them, I guess, judgment or transition. Maybe they have some type of bema judgment for them. I'm talking about the millennial saints that lived during that time. I really don't understand how that'll work for them. Now, I believe that the great white throne judgment is obviously for all the unbelievers of all time, from Cain all the way up to whoever the last one's going to be, especially those that rebel at the end of the millennial kingdom and the little season. So they will face the great white throne judgment. I don't know. I don't know what the program is going to be for those who are believers inside of the millennial kingdom. Like, how do they transition from their mortality inside the millennial kingdom to the eternal order of events? Clearly, there will be a transition. I don't know what that will be. They're not going to stay in their mortal bodies for the rest of eternity. Although, I imagine that those that are born into the millennial kingdom will be born nearly flawless. Like, you know, let's say that Joe and Jill survive the tribulation, survive, the sheep and goat judgment. They go into the kingdom in their mortal bodies, and they have children. Like, their children wouldn't be born with like autism or Down syndrome or any other of those, any kind of birth defects, or like they would automatically be renewed down to the cellular level, in genetic level. They'd be in the down to the genetic level, their very core. So if they had like mRNAs, or they had any kind of anything that had changed their DNA or changed anything about them, or gave them, that they were predisposed to have cancer or whatever, that would automatically be healed. And then that child that was going to be born to them would automatically be the perfect version of them as well. So had that child, by the same couple, had that child been born in the world of like today, let's say that child were to grow up as a female, and she would only get to the height of 5'5", predisposed to like diabetes. You could list off all the things, right? And that was going to be her life had she been born this side of Daniel's 70th week. But now that she's being born inside of the kingdom age, there's no genetic flaws in her whatsoever. Now she's going to be 6'1", beautiful, no genetic predispositions to cancers or anything else, diabetes, whatever. And now that's her reality. That's kind of how I understand it. Maybe it doesn't happen that way. That's just how I see that playing out. And I probably gave you way more than you were asking for. All right, let's do this as the last one, Coco. So from BPNE, question: based on Genesis 3:17 to 18, with the ground, earth being cursed, is this why Jesus had to wear a crown of thorns to reverse the curse on the earth? No, but that is, well, I don't know, but that is fascinating. I like that idea, and I'm pretty sure I've heard that before from somewhere. I'm not entirely sure. Uh, Michael C. Lewis says, couldn't those saved in the millennium be changed immediately upon salvation? Now that is an interesting idea, and maybe it happens that way. Maybe it's that if you don't make that decision by the age of 100, that you die in a natural your natural form. But those who make that decision before that age convert. At the age of 100, they go from being 100 in their natural 101 in their natural body to being in this new immortal body. I don't know. Certainly possible. Certainly possible. Thank you guys for all the great questions tonight. Again, forgive me for my amateurish um, meanderings on this new platform. So give me a little bit. I like it. I'm digging it. Like I'm digging all the things that I can do with this. And I don't know. You guys tell me. Has the sound been okay? The quality, audio quality. 49er fan. The midnight show. The topics could be showing how the daily news events were foretold. Yeah, I was just thinking that for sure. I also want to touch on relationships. Um, just thinking back about my own walk and my own relationship with my spouse and how we deal with prophecy and maybe that's a topic that has some interest in it. I don't want it to be like some kind of a Dateline or midnight love caller kind of thing where you call in and tell me all your emotional problems. I am not equipped to answer those questions. I was just thinking like productive and pragmatic ways we can share things that have helped in terms of you know if you like prophecy and your spouse doesn't, or how do you live, or maybe it's a family thing, where your whole family is not into prophecy but you are, or there's a thousand different ways this could go. So anyways, yeah. And I don't know, I think it could be interesting, just not it doesn't always have to be necessarily um Derek. Oh brother, you're killing me, man. Oh man, yeah, definitely not that. I do not. In fact, that almost might kill it for me because I do not want to make it anything even remotely like that. Good lord, could you imagine? Oh man, yeah. I would. uh, yeah. And the only reason I'm thinking about it is because when you look at every topic within prophecy has been touched on except for this, how does it impact you in an emotional sense? Like, How does it impact relationships? How does it impact marriages? How does it impact relationships with your parents or your children or your siblings? Kind of the emotional toll it takes on us. And I don't, again, I don't want to turn it into some kind of Dr. Phil show because I am not equipped to answer those kind of questions. Those are far way outside of my lane of expertise. But I think talking about this stuff maybe might be cathartic for everybody, you know? And it's one of those topics that we don't really talk about at all. And you look at what's you look at great ministries. I'm talking like just class, just the top of the class, just I mean the very best ministries being brought low by infidelity or brought low by whatever. Look at like Ravi Zacharias. And you know, I think that I don't care what you do in your life. I don't care if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a pilot, a veteran, a nuclear physicist, a nurse anesthetist. I don't even know if I could say that right. Anesthetist. Whatever it is you do, the hardest job in the planet by a long shot is being married, because you can look at every one of those professions, those and every one of those people involved in those professions could be, quadruple doctorates, and they could be the top person in their field, but they're divorced 3 times or whatever, so clearly they are not succeeding in that area, right? So I don't know, it's just one of those areas that we don't really talk about. And we've seen a number of pastors in the Dallas Fort Worth area that have gone down in flames for relationship stuff problems. And I don't think that our prophecy community is outside of the realm of that. I mean, I just think it's healthy for us to talk about this stuff, and so more about their emotional relationship side stuff. But I don't know. It's just a thought. I haven't fully committed to it. I don't know if I could do it every night for. I don't know. We'll figure something out. Maybe Saturday nights or something. All right. Well, thank you guys for. I was saying, if you think you're crazy, you're doing it right. Yep. uh, Good times. Good times. Well, this is all in the spirit of this. Let's read this and then we'll close out. Hebrews chapter 10. Hold me to this. Let's do this every time we close out from here on out. We'll close out with Hebrews. I want to close out with Hebrews 10. Let's do 23 through 25. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. So I know the channel is Rev 310, and that's still the keystone for this channel. But like, I love this idea of stirring each other to works, to love and good works, so much more as you see the day approaching. So let me encourage you guys to go out and be the very best versions of you tomorrow, whatever that is, or whatever that looks like, and pray that God gives you open doors and opportunities to share the gospel. So thank you guys. Yeah, hit that like button like it owes you money. Help me out. I don't understand the algorithms or whatever, but apparently that helps. All All right. I don't know when I'll be on next. I thought I was on this week with Tom Hughes, but it's the 22nd, so that's going to be a couple weeks. But I don't know. We'll see what the week looks like and the news and all that. If something crazy happens on Wednesday, I need to start the Ephesians study. I just haven't had the bandwidth. I have a lot of stuff going on with work, and it's things are shifting and changing. So before I commit to that, I want to kind of know what's going to happen from day to day. But yeah, I'm digging this new platform. Pray it all works out. I've just got everything off SoundStream. I think I'm done with Zoom. Zoom is way too complicated for me, and it seems to be working out okay. So I'm gonna give it a shot. So God bless you guys. Take care, and Maranatha, come Lord Jesus. Bye.